In the end, Project MKUltra forces us to confront something deeper than conspiracy, deeper than secrecy, deeper than the Cold War. It forces us to confront ourselves, because the true danger was never just the experiments. It was the environment that allowed them to happen. An environment built on urgency, on fear, on the belief that survival required superiority at any cost. When leaders become convinced that the threat is absolute, they begin to see limits as obstacles, oversight as interference, ethics as delay. And once that shift happens, extraordinary actions begin to feel ordinary. MKUltra did not unfold in chaos. It unfolded in offices, in meetings, in memorandums written in calm, clinical language. Develop techniques to control human behavior. A single sentence. Measured. Professional. Detached. Behind that sentence were real people. Patients who believed they were receiving treatment. Students who believed they were advancing science. Soldiers who believed they were serving their country. None of them signed up to become fragments in a classified archive. Yet, that is exactly what they became. The tragedy of MKUltra is not only that it happened. It is that it happened within a system that considered itself moral. A democracy. A nation that spoke publicly about freedom, dignity, and human rights. And still, in private, lines were crossed. This contradiction is what makes the story enduring, because it proves that no system is immune. No country is immune. No era is immune. All it takes is enough fear, enough justification, and enough secrecy. By the time MKUltra was exposed, the damage had already been done. Investigations revealed fragments. Victims told partial stories. Destroyed files left permanent gaps. But the full truth will never be known. We will never know how many subjects were involved. How many experiments went unrecorded? How many psychological wounds were misdiagnosed as personal weakness? History is incomplete, and incomplete history leaves room for repetition. That is why MKUltra matters beyond its timeline. It serves as a case study in how power behaves when it believes it cannot afford to hesitate. When the objective becomes absolute, methods become flexible. When fear becomes dominant, conscience becomes negotiable. And when secrecy becomes routine, accountability becomes optional. In the decades since MKUltra ended, technology has advanced beyond anything its architects could have imagined. Data can now map behavior in real time. Psychological profiles can be built without a single interview. Patterns of belief can be tracked, predicted, and influenced at scale. The tools are more sophisticated, more subtle, less visible, which makes the lesson even more relevant. Because influence does not need to announce itself. It can arrive quietly, through repetition, through emotional triggers, through carefully curated information. And most people will never feel controlled. They will feel informed, guided, certain. That is the modern paradox. Control does not always feel like control. MKUltra tried to force the mind open. It tried to break identity down to its foundations. Modern systems, by contrast, often shape perception gently, incrementally, without the subject ever realizing influence is occurring. The objective is no longer to erase memory. It is to shape attention. Because attention determines belief. Belief determines behavior. And behavior determines power. This does not mean that history is repeating in secret laboratories. But it does mean the central question remains unresolved. How much influence is too much? Who decides where the ethical boundary lies? And who ensures that power does not quietly expand beyond it? MKUltra demonstrated what happens when those questions are not asked loudly enough. It demonstrated that oversight must be active, not symbolic. That transparency must be enforced, not assumed. That trust must be earned continuously, not demanded. Perhaps the most sobering realization is this. MKUltra did not collapse because morality prevailed. It collapsed because exposure became unavoidable, which means secrecy was its greatest shield. And secrecy thrives in complacency. The final lesson of MKUltra is not paranoia. It is vigilance. Not suspicion of everything, but awareness that systems, even well-intentioned ones, can drift when pressure intensifies. Freedom is not maintained by assuming good intentions. It is maintained by demanding accountability. The people affected by MKUltra were not statistics. They were individuals whose trust was exploited. Their stories remind us that abstract policies have human consequences, that strategic decisions ripple outward into real lives, and that the line between research and abuse is not theoretical. It is lived. As time passes, MKUltra risks becoming a historical footnote, a strange episode from the Cold War, a cautionary tale that feels distant. But distance can be deceptive, because the forces that created MKUltra still exist. Fear still shapes policy. Power still seeks advantage. Technology still expands faster than ethical debate. The difference is not whether the temptation exists. The difference is whether society recognizes it early enough. Project MKUltra ended on paper, but the responsibility it revealed did not. It left behind a question that transcends decades. When security and morality collide, which one bends? History shows us that the answer is not automatic. It depends on vigilance, on transparency, on the courage to question even the institutions we trust. The human mind is powerful, resilient, complex. It should never be treated as a battlefield without consent. MKUltra taught us that once the mind becomes a target, the damage is not only psychological, it is civic, cultural, moral. Because when citizens begin to doubt the integrity of their own institutions, the fracture extends beyond any single program. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. And that may be the deepest scar MKUltra left behind. Not the destroyed files, not the hearings, not even the experiments themselves, but the realization that freedom requires constant defense, not only from external enemies, but from internal fear. Project MKUltra is history, but its lesson is ongoing. Power must be questioned, secrecy must be limited, and fear must never be allowed to rewrite ethics without resistance. Because once it does, the line between protection and violation becomes dangerously thin. And history has already shown us how easily that line can disappear. If there is one final layer to this story, it is not about secrecy. It is about memory. Because what makes Project MKUltra dangerous even today is not just what was done, but how easily it could have been forgotten. When the files were destroyed, it was not only evidence that burned. It was narrative control. History is shaped not just by actions, but by records, by documentation, by what survives. And MKUltra survived only in fragments. A budget entry here, a testimony there, a partially recovered memo, a survivor's voice trembling under oath. Without those fragments, the program could have dissolved into rumor, dismissed as paranoia, written off as exaggeration. That alone tells us something critical. Power understands the importance of memory. When mistakes are erased instead of examined, systems are free to repeat them in subtler forms. The destruction of MKUltra documents was not just damage control. It was historical control. Because When future generations search for proof, they will find gaps. And gaps create doubt. Doubt weakens outrage. And weakened outrage prevents reform. This is why the story matters beyond its timeline. MKUltra forces us to confront how institutions protect themselves. Not always through denial, not always through force, but through complexity, through confusion, through partial truths. When investigations concluded in the 1970s, the public received an answer. Yes, abuses occurred. Yes, oversight failed. Yes, new safeguards would prevent recurrence. It sounded responsible, measured, resolved. But resolution without accountability is not justice. It is closure without consequence. And consequence is what deters repetition. The absence of major prosecutions did not simply protect individuals. It protected a culture that prioritized national advantage over individual rights, a culture that believed some sacrifices were invisible enough to justify. The tragedy of MKUltra is not only that minds were harmed, it is that the harm was compartmentalized. Each victim isolated, each experiment separated, each failure labeled as an exception rather than a pattern. Compartmentalization protects systems. It prevents outrage from becoming unified. It keeps stories fragmented. And fragmentation makes large truths feel small. This strategy did not end with MKUltra. Modern institutions still rely on complexity to shield accountability. Policies layered within policies. Contracts within contracts. Data flows hidden behind technical language. The more complex a system becomes, the harder it is for the public to trace responsibility. And when responsibility cannot be traced, trust erodes silently. Trust is not destroyed in a single moment. It weakens gradually. MKUltra weakened trust in medicine, in academia, in intelligence agencies. It introduced a permanent question into public consciousness. What else might be hidden? That question is powerful. It fuels skepticism, sometimes productive, sometimes corrosive. But skepticism is not born in a vacuum. It is born when transparency fails. The long shadow of MKUltra stretches into cultural memory, into films, books, whispers of mind control, conspiracy theories that grow in the absence of clarity. When official history leaves gaps, unofficial history fills them. Some of those stories exaggerate, some distort, but they exist because certainty was denied. And this reveals another lesson. Secrecy does not only hide truth, it breeds speculation. Speculation fills silence, and silence invites mistrust. The final phase of MKUltra is not about what the CIA did. It is about what society learned, or failed to learn. Did we strengthen oversight permanently? Did we build systems that resist fear-based decision-making? Did we ensure that ethical debate keeps pace with technological advancement? Or did we move on, assuming that exposure alone was enough? History suggests that exposure without reform becomes ritual, a cycle, scandal, investigation, apology, forgetting. The cycle continues until vigilance interrupts it. Project MKUltra offers a rare opportunity in historical study. It is documented enough to confirm, incomplete enough to disturb, distant enough to examine, recent enough to matter. It stands as evidence that no democracy is immune to overreach. No intelligence agency is immune to mission creep. No scientific community is immune to ethical drift. But it also stands as evidence of something else. Exposure is possible. Investigation is possible. Public pressure is powerful. The Senate hearings of the 1970s did not uncover everything, but they uncovered enough. Enough to force change. Enough to introduce oversight committees. Enough to create legal frameworks that did not previously exist. That matters, because history is not only a record of failure, it is a record of correction. MKUltra was a failure of restraint. But the exposure of MKUltra was a demonstration of accountability, even if incomplete. And incomplete accountability is still better than silence. The question moving forward is not whether power will test boundaries again. It will. The question is whether society will recognize it early enough. Whether journalists will ask questions sooner. Whether whistleblowers will be protected rather than punished. Whether transparency will be proactive rather than reactive. The human mind is not a laboratory instrument. It is not a strategic asset. It is not a battlefield. It is the foundation of identity, autonomy, choice. When institutions experiment with that foundation, without consent, they do more than harm individuals. They destabilize trust in the very systems meant to protect freedom. That destabilization lingers. Across decades, across generations. Project MKUltra reminds us that ethics are not obstacles to progress. They are safeguards against regression. Without them, innovation becomes exploitation, security becomes justification, and fear becomes policy. As we close this chapter, one final thought remains. The past does not repeat automatically. It repeats when its warnings are ignored. MKUltra is not proof that darkness defines institutions. It is proof that light must be constant. Oversight must be active. Transparency must be demanded. And power must be questioned not out of hostility, but out of responsibility. Because democracy is not self-sustaining. It relies on informed citizens, persistent inquiry, and the refusal to accept secrecy as reassurance. Project MKUltra began in fear, expanded in secrecy, ended in exposure. What happens next depends not on hidden agencies, but on collective memory. If we remember, if we question, if we demand clarity, then the lesson of MKUltra becomes protection. If we forget, if we grow complacent, if we assume it can't happen again, then history waits patiently, not to surprise us, but to repeat the test.